Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the new Black Keys record, Turn Blue. The Black Keys are a rock duo hailing from Ohio. A lot of people know them for their very vintage rock sound, which is incredibly indebted to garage rock, the blues, the very soulful voice of frontman and guitarist Dan Auerbach, as well as the very groovy and beefy drum beats of drummer Patrick Carney. I mean, they're a duo. There's not much more they can be known for. On some of the band's best records, their sound is incredibly stripped back, simple, and straightforward. Thick Freakness, Rubber Factory, that really awesome EP of Junior Kimbrough covers. Black Keys had a simple sound that had a lot to offer, but they have since moved past it. In the late 2000s, the band started gaining more attention, getting a larger audience. It put them on a larger label. It put them in a position to work with in-demand producer Danger Mouse, who they have been working with consistently since initiating this relationship on the LP Attack and Release. Which is possibly my least favorite Black Keys album. A record where, in my opinion, the Keys basically lose their viscera, they lose their edge, they lose their rock gusto in favor of adding all of this extra instrumentation, all of these bells and whistles, completely doing a 180 on the very simple sound that got them to where they are. And do not get me wrong, I do not favor the idea of just making the same record over and over, because in a sense I think that's what the Black Keys started doing shortly after the release of Attack and Release, with the records Brothers and El Camino, two records that to me rehashed a lot of the ideas of their older stuff, but with better production. Do not let that deter you from listening to these records. Brothers was actually an incredible success for the Keys. It was really that moment where they were in the spotlight and they executed in a way that pleased old fans and new. I do like the LP, and even though I do like quite a few songs off of El Camino, as a record, I think it's disappointingly predictable. So I kind of went into this new Black Keys LP, Turning Blue, dying to hear the band try something new. Even if it's just new for them. I was in a position where I was convinced that I would settle for that. And I got it. However, only in a sense though. While this record is not as simple as El Camino or Brothers, I mean, it's definitely not as raw as those albums either. Black Keys come through with what I think is kind of like the sequel to Attack and Release, in the sense that there are tons of bells and whistles, arranged instrumentation all around this LP, not really the bluesy and garage-inspired grit that we've heard on numerous records from these guys. Much more clean, much more pristine, refined, a place for everything and everything in its place. And this was a pretty exciting prospect when the opener of this LP started Weight of Love, the longest song in this entire LP, and a really interesting, soulful, psychedelic rock odyssey that I would call progressive, but only because of how expansive the song structure is. However, as I dive deeper into the LP, many of the songs on this thing just do not deliver, either because of ridiculous production choices, like on the song Turn Blue, which has one of the best hooks on this entire LP, but for whatever reason, there's this really weird whooshing noise effect or keyboard playing over the entirety of the track. It's just a piece of sonic filler that doesn't add anything to the song, it only subtracts. There's the song Fever, which sonically, it's much different for the Black Keys, but songwriting-wise, it's maybe one of the cheapest tunes I've ever heard these guys pull together. It sounds like a Foster the People song. The Black Keys have more soul than this. And they definitely proved that on the song Year in Review, which to me is the most true blue soul song on this entire LP. Out of all the older, more vintage sounds that these guys emulate, this one, in my opinion, really goes over the best. Because not every experiment and moment of emulation on this record is that pretty, like the closer on here, which just sounds like a nightmare of a Creedence Clearwater Revival song. Or even It's Up to You Now, which feels kind of like a Strange Loves-inspired garage rock tune with all these jungle drums. In addition to the Black Keys trying out a lot of new flavors and coming out with a mixed bag of results, Dan comes through with quite a few moments on this record where he is singing in falsetto, and the results of that are mixed as well. Actually, no, I mean that they're more uniformly unpleasant to listen to. Like the song Bullet in the Brain and Waiting on Words, especially Waiting on Words, which is this sort of acoustic ballad in the midst of the record that has these rhythm guitars that open the song up that sound just like they're coming straight out of a Strokes song. And Dan is just I guess, pouring his heart out singing on this track, but it just, it's just not going over well in terms of holding the pitch and really just sounding kind of goofy. There are just so many songs on this LP that I don't like, for all the reasons I just listed, but the record as a whole to me is just kind of drab. It's unexciting because of how grand, reverbed, string-kissed, bloated, and middle-of-the-road it is. The drums and the guitars on this LP just don't have that much oomph. They're kind of tampered down by all the strings, all the extra instrumentation. It just seems to suck the energy out of this LP. And not only that, but I think a lot of what this extra instrumentation adds isn't even that interesting a lot of the time. The strings don't really punctuate as much as they just kind of drone on and just fill space that would have otherwise been filled properly with bass guitars and drums. Or there's tracks like 10 Lovers, which has this really obnoxious synthesizer lead playing the exact same melody as the vocal melody, just underneath the vocal. It's completely unnecessary, and just the tone of the synth is annoying. It seems like the more sounds the Black Keys throw into the recipe, the blander they get overall. With Turn Blue, I feel like they've taken a step towards sounding kind of anonymous. I'm feeling a strong 4 to a light 5 on this thing. Tran. Zishin, if you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Black Keys, forever.